What do you think of when you hear the word immigrant? Be honest with yourself. Do you think of borders, crime, undocumented, documented? Or do you think of the words hardworking, family, like parents and grandparents, food, culture, successful? As a reporter at Borderless magazine, which is a news outlet here in Chicago, I come across many immigration stories, and each story has its own unique individual experience. There's one particular immigration story that I found really touching, and it impacted me so much that I want to share it with you today. I wrote a story this January about a young woman named Vida Apoku. Vida is from Ghana. And in 2015, when she was only 17 years old at the time, she took the decision to leave her home country to seek a better life. Fleeing years of domestic abuse and a forced marriage as a child, she gave up her family and everything she ever knew in hopes of reaching the United States. But those years of suffrage was not over. Over 4 months, she made her way from Africa to South America and then to Central America. And along the way, she had to face jail, hunger, language barriers, and an unclear future. After finally arriving to the United States in 2016, she was granted asylum, and she fought those life challenges with ambition and education. And today, at 23 years old, she's a university student studying forensic science. So Vida's story is one out of millions of immigration and refugee stories. Those stories about journeys of strength. But when you do hear those types of immigrant stories, whether it's about like Vida's story or anything else, do you ever think to yourself why people leave their home country? Who did they leave behind, and what was their journey like? I think it's essential for immigrants to tell their own personal stories, just like how Vida told her story to me. But how do we hear more about immigration stories? Through us, the media. The media enables us to see more of the world than meets the eye. It's like a mirror that gives us an idea of what a place or a group of people might look like. But oftentimes, that image is broken. And it gives us maybe like racist stereotypes that fails to give true context or even a human face to the news that we read every day. We tend to think that immigration is only affected by policies and politicians and those lawmakers, but those policies are discussed through the media. And that's why the media's role is so important in not only influencing the public's perception of immigration, but also reaching those politicians and those lawmakers so they know what is going on the ground locally and globally. The United States has so many famous people that are immigrants. And in the fashion world, there's one of the most iconic world supermodels, who's Iman. And she came to the United States as a refugee from Somalia with her family. And she says one thing when she tells her story so proudly that relates to many immigrants. And it's one thing that money can never buy. And it's for her parents to live and die in their mother country. And for them, she says, they are refugees for life. There's, of course, many different types of immigration. But do you know what refugees in particular have to go through? The humility, the dangers, the helplessness that they have to go through is already dehumanizing. And that's besides what the media has to say about them, that's besides them dealing with their past traumas, and that's besides them adapting to a new country, new language, new society, where they are strangers. There's a New York Times article that describes the migrants at the border as a surge and a challenge. But children are not surges, and they are not challenges. So that type of language can lead to dehumanization if it's not used ethically and responsibly. In my experience, the most impactful and contextualized journalism are those stories about the individual experience. And that's our focus at Borderless Magazine. So Borderless Magazine was co-founded by Northeastern Illinois University professor Nissa Ree. And it was founded during the news cycle about the travel ban, where they found that there was not enough reporting being done about the individual experiences of immigrants. So if the media is part of the problem, then it is definitely part of the solution. Imagine all of those negative stories that we hear every day. Imagine if they were shaped differently. In 2020 of last year, we published our As Told To method, which is an illustration designed to empower the storytelling process in 9 steps. We believe that you should ask the interviewee if they would like to share their story and use their language of choice. Ask the interviewee, discuss the risks and the benefits with the interviewee, and ask them, could you get hurt if we use your real image or your real name? It's important to conduct the interview in a safe space and always encourage the interviewee to ask you questions. It's essential to follow up and fact check with them. You don't want to have any misinformation out there. Publish their story in a first-person narrative. And finally, publish their story in their native language too. So this means that journalists should be extra cautious when framing a story or a headline. Another great tip I have is speak in the active voice. State the obvious. The reason why this As Told To method is effective is because it responds to the language and information needs that immigrants need, and it creates a more representative media landscape, which humanizes their story in general. As someone whose father came to the United States 30 years ago fleeing the Lebanese Civil War, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't have graduated from Northeastern Illinois University. I wouldn't be in grad school. I wouldn't be a reporter reporting on this subject, and I wouldn't be speaking to you here today. As a Lebanese American, and as someone who was raised in Lebanon, I find it essential for myself to talk or highlight this issue, especially because Lebanon is going through an economic crisis, a humanitarian crisis, and it's dealing with the aftermath of the Beirut explosion that happened last year in August. A lot of people in Lebanon are navigating immigration, whether they should stay or leave, just to have a normal, relaxing life for themselves, for their children, for their families. So I personally understand the massive toll immigration can have on one's life and one's family, and the separation it comes with. If you look around you, immigrants are your everyday neighbors. Here at Northeastern Illinois University, immigrants and your peers are immigrants, refugees, DACA students, dreamers, and first-generation students. So the media can be a solution. But when Muhammad Anwar, a 66-year-old Pakistani immigrant, was murdered in broad daylight in Washington, D.C. when he was delivering food, it barely got mainstream media coverage. And not a lot of people even shared his story on social media. But without the media, how do we know what kind of hardworking person Mr. Anwar was? He was a father of 3, a grandfather of 4, and he came to the United States in 2014 for a better life. There's so many untold immigration stories, just like Mr. Anwar's, and different. They're not all the same. So the media is powerful, and it should use its power for good. So the next time you read a story headline or you see an editorial cartoon, rethink and ask questions of the media. It may have an impact on you more than you think. And if you're a journalist, rethink the 9 steps of the As Told To. Remember, at the end of the day, it's about who immigrants are, not about making headlines or making clickbait.